Okay, so we will go ahead and call this special Board of Education meeting to order, please. Suzette, could we please do the roll?
Yes. Mr. Ustruck.
Here.
Mr. Keller.
He's going to be a few minutes late. He should be joining any minute.
Thank you. Mr. Schultz.
Here.
Mr. Sikich.
Present.
Mr. Lee.
Here.
Mrs. Kaiser's excused. Ms. Klug.
Here.
Mrs. Justum is excused. And President Emmons.
Here. All right, we move on with the agenda for the evening. Item 2 on the agenda is the petition to alter school district boundaries. First, we have a presentation by Mr. Misko. Turn the podium over to Mr. Misko.
Thank you. Again, my name is Torin Misko, and I reside at 12855 West North Lane in the city of New Berlin with my wife, Autumn. I also have a 6-year-old and a 8-year-old daughter who are in 1st and 3rd grade at Hoover Elementary. I am petitioning the West Allis West Milwaukee School Board to leave the West Allis West Milwaukee School District to become part of the school district in the community that I reside, which would be the New Berlin School District. I understand how the West Allis West Milwaukee School District took on portions of the city of New Berlin years ago, while both communities were not nearly as developed as they are today. But now that both communities are developed, this is the only way for me to join the school district that represents the city I live in. I'm in search for a sense of identity with the school district my children attend. This starts with the name of the school district that recognizes the West Allis and West Milwaukee communities, while remaining silent about the portion of New Berlin they represent, even though an elementary school is located in New Berlin. Other school districts with cross-municipal boundaries recognize the importance of this sense of identity. Examples of this would be school districts of Whitnall, Nicolet, Arrowhead, Kettle Moraine, just to name a few. In addition, I have listened to several of the school board candidates talk about what West Allis and the West Milwaukee is doing as a community that could impact the school district, and there's never any mention about New Berlin. As a New Berlin resident, I pay taxes that go towards the New Berlin Recreation Department. As a West Allis, West Milwaukee school district resident, I also pay school taxes that go towards the West Allis, West Milwaukee Recreation Department, which included approximately $8 million for a community recreation center clear across the city I do not even live in and will never use. This contributes to almost a full $1 per 1,000 increase in my school tax rate when compared to the New Berlin School District. I want my 1st and 3rd grade daughters back in school to properly gain the education and social experience that is needed during these important developmental years. It is not effective to teach a 1st and 3rd grader in a virtual environment for as long as the West Allis West Milwaukee School District has been doing so. I do not feel this way because of the lack of effort the teachers put in at Hoover Elementary. The teachers have done an excellent job adapting to a virtual environment, and they are doing truly amazing work each day. With that said, if you were able to see the excitement on my daughters had a couple weeks ago after coming home from school for the first time in almost a year, it would be evidence enough to show the true impact of getting back to school. It was as if they were coming home from a trip to Disney World, not a Thursday spent at school. I often hear statements like, we will follow the science and we will go back when it is safe to do so. However, the CDC has a vast amount of information and evidence for schools to conduct in-person learning in a safe manner, and there have been many surrounding school districts that have been successful in doing so since the beginning of the school year. One such school district is New Berlin. Going back to my statements on a sense of identity with the community I live in, the West Allis West Milwaukee School District is using COVID-19 data from Milwaukee County instead of Waukesha County, which is where I reside, as well as where Hoover Elementary School is located. I think it is, since I live several houses away from the school district boundary, I've been told by the school district that I would be creating an island if my petition were approved, and that is not allowed. I would start out by saying the West Allis West Milwaukee School District already has islands within its borders, as many school districts and municipalities do. More importantly, I would turn your attention to a Wisconsin Supreme Court case referenced Stockbridge School District versus Department of Public Instruction School District Boundary Appeal Board. This court case allows detachment of island parcels from school districts that adjoin, which obviously the New Berlin and West Allis West Milwaukee School District do. The detached parcel or home need not adjoin the school district to which it is attached. The Stockbridge School District lost this court case in all three courts, to include the Circuit Court, the Court of Appeals, and then finally the Wisconsin Supreme Court. I was approved recently this past school year for open enrollment through the New Berlin School District, but I was unable to make the transition due to an issue between the school districts. I am a law enforcement officer in Waukesha County and must work a schedule that does not provide any sense of consistency. My wife has a visual disability that does not allow her to drive a vehicle. Therefore, we do rely on busing to get our children to and from school. Well, the New Berlin School District was willing to discuss transportation options with us since their school bus already drives by our house. We were unable to make it work due to a West Allis West Milwaukee School Board having a policy that does not allow our school districts, does not allow other school districts to provide transportation to anyone within the West Allis West Milwaukee School District. I cannot think of why the West Allis West Milwaukee School Board has this policy in place, but it is there nonetheless. As you can imagine, this transportation issue also precludes us from sending our children to private school. As a parent that wants nothing but the best for my children, I would like to reference the 2018-2019 DPI district report cards. The New Berlin School District has a rating overall of 86.9, which is classified as significantly exceeds expectations, while the West Allis West Milwaukee School District has a rating of 71.3, which is classified as meeting expectations. I have a preference, I think as any parent would, to have my children attend the school district that has a better rating of meeting expectations. In closing, I brought reasonable information to this board that supports my desire to leave the West Allis West Milwaukee School District and become part of the New Berlin School District. The New Berlin School District has supported bringing on New Berlin residents. As you can see, my options to go to an in-person school outside of West Allis West Milwaukee School District are limited due to my unique transportation issue. I understand that the school board will have a formal vote on my petition at the February 22nd school board meeting after hearing from school district staff. I would ask that I be allowed to briefly respond to any comments made by staff, since they will have the ability to respond to my comments being made here today. I thank the school board for allowing me the time to present my petition, and I ask for your permission to leave the West Allis West Milwaukee School District and join the New Berlin School District. Thank you.
Thank you. Do we have, now we have on the agenda time for questions from the board for Mr. Misko. If anybody has any questions specifically to ask today? Noah?
Hello. I'm sorry if I missed it. How long have you been living at your residence, sir?
I've been there since 2011.
Okay. When you purchased your residence, were you aware what school district that your home would be residing in?
Yep, I'm not making a claim that I was not aware, but I also am making the petition to say I would like to move into the city I live in.
Okay.
And this is my only outlet to do so. There's no other way to change a school district boundary other than to petition the school board.
Mr. Misko, I do have a follow-up question. Did you petition the school district a few years ago as well?
I did in 2017, and that's that's why in some of my presentation I made the statements regarding the island parcels, because that's what was brought to school district staff, as well as the transportation issue and the busing, that the buses would not be allowed to drive through another school district. I wasn't really allowed to respond to those because of how the meetings are set up, where I get to go first and then comments get to be made to my comments, but I'm not able to comment on what school staff had said. But I obviously looked at that and did some research. I found the case law regarding Stockbridge School District and the DPI Board of Appeals, which clearly indicates that parcels are allowed. It's Supreme Court case law. And then I also had an opportunity to talk with the New Berlin School District just as recently as the beginning of this school year in regards to the busing issue. And like I said, my road, I live off 124th Street and Sunny Slope in between those two roads. I'm about halfway in between-ish. And the end of my road is the New Berlin School District. So the west end of my road is New Berlin School District. So they do pick up from those houses on that west end. And the only way for them to get out of the subdivision, they can't turn around the bus. They literally drive right past my house every day to make that transport. Unfortunately, because like I said, the school district does have a policy that says you guys will not allow another district to enter your district for transportation reasons. They were willing to listen to me and make a claim to say that I could get busing through open enrollment merely because of the fact the bus drives by my house already. I don't think they would have went out of their way if they had to, but since that was the case, they were willing to listen to it. But when your policy stated that it was not allowed, which is a DPI rule, I guess, is what I'm being told, that the school district should take up a policy on whether or not you'll allow that transportation. They weren't willing to do it because it would be in violation of that rule and that policy.
Thank you for the clarification. I appreciate that. Other board members have any other questions for our guest? Right. Dr. Lexman, can we confirm how we would, if we have questions after this evening, how we would go through? I remember when this happened a couple years ago, and there was some questions about this would become an action item on the agenda on the 22nd, which would therefore not have any additional public comment during the action item. So if there was additional back and forth or follow-up that needed to be happening between now and Monday, how would that be facilitated?
So I think we probably want to talk about Claire about that in closed session.
Okay.
Just to make sure we're following the proper procedures, but I would imagine if there are questions, we could gather those and share those with the petitioner to get responses before the board takes action next week.
Fantastic. So there would be plenty of time because we're having that conversation this evening. We would have that full week in order to go back and forth and ask any follow-up questions that may occur after the closed session. Just to clarify. Okay. Do any other board members have any other questions? Otherwise, we will let Mr. Misko enjoy the rest of his cold night and get home before it starts to snow. All right. Thank you very much for coming tonight and for your comments. We appreciate it.
Thank you.
All right, we will then move on to our workshops for this evening. Item 3, we've got 3.1 is our 2019-2020 financial audit review. Caitlin, if you want to get started on that.
Yes, hi everybody, good evening. We have joining us with us today our auditors from Baker Tilly. So we have Wendy Unger, she's a partner, and Michelle Walter, senior manager from Baker Tilly. So welcome. And before we throw it over to get started in our presentation, I just want to give a little bit of background, just briefly. So we are going to go through some really exciting stuff. Our 1920 audit was awesome. We are seeing improvements year after year, and it just feels really good. This one has much more improvement from the previous year, which we expected to happen for this extent of work to be done. Take some time, and we're seeing the results of that. So we've reached one of our strategic planning goals, and we are well on the way to another. So one of our strategic planning goals was to increase fund balance to 20% of the general fund or Fund 10 budget. We've met that. And then another one was to demonstrate financial responsibility through a reduction of annual audit findings by 75% from 12 a couple years ago down to 3. So we will talk through those tonight, and welcome and thank you for joining Michelle and Wendy. I think you are able to share your screen.
Yes, I am.
Awesome.
Okay. Hopefully everyone can see.
Yep.
Okay, perfect. I have a short PowerPoint that will kind of walk through it, and everything is on a very high level. So we're going to go through some financial data. We're going to go through some kind of general audit items that we want to communicate with the board. as Caitlin mentioned, I am Michelle Walter. I'm the senior manager on the audit, and Wendy Unger is also on the call. She's the partner overseeing the audit. So we'll touch on some audit results, some key financial information, and then just any other information that comes up as part of the audit. And so overall, the audit's main objective is to be able to issue an opinion on the financial statements. For 1920, we were able to issue a clean, unmodified opinion, which is the highest level of an opinion you can get from your auditor. So what that means is that the financial statements that I believe everyone has a copy of are free of any material misstatement. They have all the necessary disclosures included in them. One of the items in the opinion this year is it's called an emphasis of matter paragraph, and there were some new accounting standards that were required to be issued during the year. And so we just have to call out attention that these were issued and, you know, this is what happened because they were issued. If you were to page through the financial statements, you'd see references to items being restated. Now, restatements can happen for a variety of reasons. And for the 1920 audit, the details of this restatement can be found on page 40 of your financial statements. But this restatement was because of changing an accounting standard. So it's not going back and correcting any errors. It's following some new rules that the Government Accounting Standards Board put into place. So I'll briefly show you a couple places where that is affected, but overall, it's just an allocation of where fund balance is sitting. Now, before we jump into the financial information, I want to touch on a different report that we issued. It's called the Reporting and Insights document. So if you have copies of it, I don't know, do you guys see a different screen now?
Yep, we're seeing your reporting.
Okay. So this is a new format to what you would have seen in the prior year's audit. So it's a kind of updated version of the same document where we have certain communications that we have with you, the board, as to how the audit went, any key items that we need to talk to the board about or management. And it's kind of all in one place. But kind of the layout of this report, we walk through the audit approach. And with this, we talk through the objectives of the audit, the responsibilities of us as your auditors, as well as management, as well as some significant audit areas. The next section of this report digs deeper into kind of the internal control of the district. And we have two material weaknesses that we need to communicate. The first one is internal control over financial reporting. And this is because we as your auditors do your financial statements and have material journaling. Now, I will say Caitlin hit the nail on the head when she said things were kind of night and day from last year's audit to this year's audit. So the district was able to complete more financial schedules, including the schedule of federal and state awards, as well as a lot less material journal entries. So significant progress has been made in that aspect. This is a very common finding if your auditors do your financial statements. It's a cost-benefit analysis that many districts weigh, and it just makes more sense to have the auditors do them. So, the second material weakness is the internal control environment, and there are a couple transition cycles that there were some gaps in segregation of duties. You may hear items being called where someone's doing something and there's not a second set of eyes kind of approving it. We have, I think, gone through and Caitlin and her team has expanded a lot of processes and controls in place that listing has been cut down. So progress is made in the right direction there. In 2019, we had what was known as a significant deficiency over purchase cards because the controls that were in place were pretty lacking and inconsistently followed. That procedures and processes has once again done a complete 180. And so we have this in the letter as an other comment and recommendation only because it wasn't in effect the whole year. So I would expect for 2021, we wouldn't have issues unless something changed in the process. So a couple other recommendations that we include in this letter, I mentioned the purchase cards, the retiree liability accounts. I know this has been something that the district has been working on for now a couple years, and I think it's still in progress with getting those accounts cleaned up and balances being reconciled. And also we have some IT best practices that we kind of recommend there. As far as the next section in this report is the required communications we're required to have as your auditors. So we are required to communicate any change in accounting policies or principles, any significant estimates that may be included in your financial statements, any material journal entries, which in this report we detail them out. And so there are 3 this year, so not very many. If there were any difficulties that we encountered as part of the audit, we would have communicated these in this letter, but happy to say there are none, and this would not probably be the first time you are hearing of them if there were. So also in this document, there's kind of some things that the board can look at and consider going forward as it relates to school districts, COVID-19, kind of some things that may trigger some thoughts going forward. There's also going to be a copy of what is called the management representation letter, which is a letter from management to us stating that all the information they provided is accurate to the best of their knowledge. So Caitlin mentioned also before about findings related to the audit was one of your strategic goals. And so as part of the financial statements, we also issue an opinion on the state and federal grants. So compliance over these programs. And so there were 2 compliance findings in 2020, one related to Medicaid and one related to the child nutrition cluster. So there's 2 in 2020, and that was down from 6 in 2019. So those programs are getting cleaned up and the processes over those seem to be getting better. So once again, another instance where things are moving in the right direction. Okay, now we're going to jump into a little of the financial information. Once again, at a very high level, but kind of to give you some exposure to what's in that financial report. So the first fund we're going to look at is the general fund, which is the district's main operating fund. And, oh geez. Can you still see the screen? Perfect. Okay, so for 2020, the revenues and other resources, which are any transfers in, were actually $110,688,000. This is about $4 million over the budget that was set up of $106 million. Main reason for this increase is your federal funding. Between Title I, Title II, Medicaid, those items, you had about 2.6 million more than was budgeted. On the flip side, the expenditures and the transfers out were $128 million compared to a budget of about $130 million. Once again, this is to the positive where expenditures were less. There are some fluctuations between different categories of instruction and support services, but this also includes that $25 million of debt payoff for the note that was come due in 2020. So at the end of the year, the budget was set up to use fund balance of $24 million, when in actual, the general fund used about $17.9 million. So $6 million to the positive. So at the end of the year, the general fund had $25 million of fund balance. And here's where I mentioned that restated amount. That $43 million that we started the year with was increased from last year's financial statements because of a new way we had to account for some items that were previously in student activity funds. So that got moved and shifted over to the general fund. So at the end of the year, of that $25.6 million, $141,000 is considered non-spendable. So that cash has already gone out the door because of prepaid amounts. So the cash is out the door, but the expenditure hasn't hit fund balance yet. And kind of, I put page numbers on all of these information so you can kind of jump back if you want to look at further details. So page 39 is where we detail out a lot of this fund balance information. $2.3 million is considered restricted, and these are for grant monies that had carryover amounts. So they have to be used for the purpose of those grants. And I believe AGR grant is about $2.2 million of this amount. So that is the big bulk of it. So that leaves about $23.2 million of unassigned fund balance in the general fund. This is the money that the district can use to fund operations and use on a day-to-day basis. This accounts for 24% of the 2021 budgeted expenditures. So a very good percentage to be at for the general fund. So moving on to the other funds of the district. Their special education fund is also shown separately in the financial statement. You'll see that there are revenues of about $15.1 million. And this is made up of your federal state grants as well as the transfers in to make this fund whole. Because this fund can't carry a fund balance at the end of the year. So because of 15.1 million of expenditures, that fund balance is zero at the end of the year. The capital projects fund is the next column over. $837,000 of revenues during the year. And this is primarily made up of new debt issue of $650,000 combined with about $146,000 of focus on energy funding. The expenditures during the year were $420,000, mostly for the energy efficiency projects that were happening. So overall, $417,000 got added to fund balance, and at the end of the year, $10.4 million was in that fund's fund balance. Of this amount, 2.4 is restricted to the long-term capital improvement fund, which was set up to kind of fund future projects down the road. The remaining $8 million is committed for capital projects funds or capital projects. The next column is the community service fund. This had $4.1 million of revenue during the year. 3 million of that was tax levy and the remaining was program fees, compared to $9.6 million of expenditures during the year. So this fund had a decrease of about $5.5 million down to $2 million of fund balance. All of this piece minus a small $7,000 is restricted for community service programs. The debt service fund is the next one. $31.2 million of revenue. The property tax levy for this fund was about 4.4 million, and the rest of that revenue was transfers in from other funds. So we saw that offset in the general fund of the 25 million that got paid out. It comes into the debt service fund to eventually be paid out. So that $28.9 million is the principal and interest that's due on debt. So overall, this fund increased fund balance by $2.3 million up to about $6 million. And all of that is restricted for debt service. The last column is the non-major funds. And so this is the food service fund for the district as well as the gift fund. Overall, these two funds combined decreased fund balance about $140,000 down to 3.6 million at the end of the year. And you can see the breakout. 1.5 million is restricted for that gift fund, and then 2 million is restricted for food service. A couple other items I want to call your attention to within the footnotes themselves of the financial statement. These 4 items make up a good deal of your footnotes. Nothing is really unusual about these items, but I just want to point you in the direction of where you can find this information. The district can borrow 10% of the equalized value. So that is up to $478 million that the district could borrow if they needed to. Actual at June 30th, 2020 is $21.3 million. So there is a lot of capacity if needed, but at this point it's not. There is a net pension asset recorded for the district during the year related to Wisconsin retirement system. This can be detailed out on page 40 of the financial statements. I'll just note that this amount shifts between an asset and a liability kind of year to year. It seems to be flip-flopping. So in the past, this was included in the long-term liability footnote because last year it was a liability. And this is just all based on kind of the activity that happens at WRS. So it's not an actual amount that you are paying in or receiving. It's pretty much a financial statement reporting line item. The next two items are the OPEB liabilities, one for the health insurance of the district, and that can be detailed out on page 48. This health insurance liability is $47.8 million, and that is calculated based on an actuarial valuation that is done. And then the net OPEB liability for life insurance is on page 51. And so this is much smaller. It's $3.8 million, and that is done through the state program. So overall, very high level detail of what's going into the 2020 financial statements. We would be happy to take any questions if you guys have any about the audit, about the numbers, about the process, anything in general.
Questions for our auditors? I'm trying to scroll through the people.
Well, and you have mine and Wendy's contact information as well. So even if something comes up, after you digest and look at the information, or even during the year, if you have any questions kind of on anything, please feel free to reach out to either one of us or have Caitlin get in contact with us, and we'll be happy to provide any answers we can.
Thank you, Michelle. And as we've been on the board a couple of years, and we this is an annual event, is reviewing the audit. To have the presentation be shorter every year because there's less material findings, and because, as you said, that there's lots of progress being made year over year, which is very continues to be refreshing and wonderful. I see Jeff nodding along with me as well there, because I know he feels the same way. But kudos to Caitlin and your team to ensure that we are continuing to move in these positive directions. Obviously, it doesn't take much to kind of send a district, spiraling out of control. So to make sure that we've got these controls in place and that we're continuing to evaluate them and make them stronger, which therefore makes the district stronger. So thank you for all of those things. So it's nice to kind of come to a board meeting and be told you're doing a pretty good job. So nice work, Caitlin. Marty, hope you're listening. So,
And
Caitlin, anything you want to add?
I would love to recognize our finance manager, Jeff Borland, and particularly our comptroller, Joan Rankin, who really helped lead the way in bettering our practices and procedures, and also district leadership, principals, and secretaries for adapting, because we made a whole lot of changes. And we could always blame the auditors, but we had to do these things. So thank you, Baker Tilly team, for working with us too through our few years of improvements and hanging in there with us. Baker Tilly has been here this is our second audit, I believe, with BT. So they've been a joy to work with, and we've been a lot of work for them. So I hope that we will continue to be less work and have fewer journal entries for Baker Tilly to do. But just a huge shout out to the business office team for this big team effort.
Yep, great job, everybody.
Yeah, I'd like to echo all of that, and also thank the board members on the finance committee just for the amount of time that they put in working with Caitlin and the team. I think has been part and parcel of kind of how we've arrived at this moment, and wildly improved from where we were. So it's really, I think, been everybody kind of pushing in the same direction around our finances, and we're in good shape, and we're going to get in better shape. So thanks to everybody that's been working on this with us.
Awesome. Great to hear. That's a great reason to kind of celebrate the team. Noah?
I just wanted to echo that there's been so many changes that have been put in place as part of audit findings in the past, and have been big changes in our district. And it's been a lot of pain, but these changes not only reduce our audit findings, but it also puts more dollars towards educating kids instead of doing other stuff that isn't educating kids. And so I think that that work has been painful, but it has at the end of the day been very fruitful. And so I do want to echo everyone's sentiments with Caitlin and her team and the staff and the administrators that have worked to put these processes in place so that we can not only make sure that the budgeted dollars that we are putting towards educating kids are going to actually do that, but then when we see surpluses and things like that as we go throughout the year, we can pivot and try to use that money for better things to, at the end of the day, use more money for educating kids. So I just wanted to make that statement as well.
Great. Well, thank you. So please refresh my memory and then for the rest of the board. So the audit itself, does that come back to the board for approval, the findings report?
Yep, our next board meeting, I believe, February 22nd, will have the approval of the 1920 audit. And these documents that Michelle referenced will be posted to our website as well as board book.
Great. This is a good reminder. Great. Well, thank you very much. We will look forward to having that on the agenda next week. Thank you. All right. So now we have our 3.2, the update on athletics and extracurricular activities. Deidre and Shelley, are you guys going to lead that one tonight?
We are. So good evening, everyone. And just to put some context on why we're here tonight, it's been a lot of the work with the Recreation and Community Services Committee, as well as the work of our Life Readiness through College and Career Preparation Committees, to start talking about where extracurriculars play a place in some of our strategic planning, where extracurriculars play a place in some of our long-term facility planning, even, and some of the things that we're trying to do as a school district. So some of the push came from our committee chair in our committee, which is Bill Ustruck, and he's gonna share some of his thoughts tonight, as well as just share some updates as to kind of where we are with participation across our district. And I will share screen. We have a couple of kind of key questions that we are hoping to answer tonight. Let me see if I can find it. There it is. A couple of key questions that we really wanted to answer, which were, get to those. How can we increase access to extracurriculars for all of our learners? What is the best practice for young athletes in increasing access to sports? And what are some key strategies we can focus on for our next steps? So there's some things that are very, very big kind of high level ideas that we'll be talking about tonight as far as philosophically where we believe these things fit within our strategic plan and the opportunity we're providing to all learners. And at the same time, then we have to walk out with some kind of feedback and direction from the full board as where do we go next with trying to increase access to all of these things for all learners. So that's kind of the big ideas of where we're trying to head this evening. Shelley, do you want to add anything to that?
Sorry, I just had to unmute myself. No, I think that's a good overview. And similarly in Deidre's committee, the Recreation and Community Services Committee led by Gary as our chair, and our vice chair, Bill, have been having some conversations around the role extracurriculars plays not only in school, but in the community as well. So it worked well for us all to come together to have that discussion.
Okay, and then joining us tonight are athletic directors from both Central, Justin Marion, and Hale, Greg Lucas, are on the call this evening, as well as we'll hear from our committee chairs. And then we also have Steve Harris has joined us this evening, who serves as the principal at Pershing and is currently doing some work in our offices at our 1205 building. And he's gonna help us understand a little bit more around taking some next steps and help us plan out some of our action steps that may happen after this evening in order to keep this work moving forward. But I wanted to kick us off tonight. Poor Marty and Jeff Thompson already got to hear this story today, with a picture of something very ironic that happened over the weekend. So I was asked to write a story about a teacher that had impact in my life. And I wrote this lengthy story about my dad, who passed away in 1993. So many, many years ago, at the very young age of 52 years old. And my dad spent his entire life as a teacher and a coach. Well, I shouldn't say that. He went into the restaurant business for a few years shortly before he passed away. But he spent most of his life as a teacher and as a coach. And when we talk about the impact of extracurriculars in somebody's life, this sort of interesting thing happened to us over the weekend, where I was writing this article about him and telling my husband and my daughter, neither of whom ever got to meet my dad, all of these stories about my dad as a coach and a teacher throughout his lifetime. And at about 2:00 that afternoon, finished writing this thing, submitted it to the thing I had to. This picture, that is my dad and the 1969 St. Catherine's of Siena and Oak Park, Illinois championship 8th grade basketball team, gets posted on their alumni website. And people started Caitlin's face, yep. People started writing stories about my dad as a coach and as a teacher and as an influence in their life. I'm gonna get teary-eyed. That were so powerful that I thought it just contributes to everything that we're here to talk about tonight. So I'm just gonna read you a couple of the comments that people put on that website. Now remember, these are students that my dad had in 1969, so 52 years ago. That is when my dad knew some of these learners. And he said, he gave women the first opportunity to play organized sports. I continued to play 3 sports in high school and 2 in college. Mr. Driscoll, my dad, gave us girls such an advantage compared to other girls our age, many of whom didn't get the opportunity to play organized sports until college after Title IX passed. And we set the volleyball exactly the same way too. Sort of a big joke with my dad. We played against each other in college. Many thanks to Mr. Driscoll, who was wholly responsible for getting so many of us involved in the world of sports that led us through most of our lives. And then people were saying things like he showed us in many ways how much he cared, and he was always straightforward and kind. He was invested as a leader and a teacher, always committed to doing the right thing. It was good to see how many of us found him as a mentor and an inspirational teacher. So I decided to share that this evening because we're talking about the impact that we have in education, not just always from what happens in the classroom day in and day out. And if you really want to follow it online, you can see all kinds of funny stories about my dad driving around and picking up kids who were getting in trouble on the streets and forcing them to play sports in the gym as the punishment. And then they started hanging out at the gym instead of ever getting in any trouble on the streets. And it goes on and on. But the impact of that experience on people are still talking about it 52 years later on a random Facebook page in the middle of a Saturday afternoon. And so it spoke a lot to kind of that purpose and intent of getting kids involved in school beyond just what happens during the day that I thought was worthy of a share this evening for the whole group. So we'll kick it off with that and then jump into our strategic plan. So our strategic plan is our why and kind of drives what we're doing. So we're going to talk about our strategic plan, and then we're going to give some data and some information on where are we now, ask some questions of the board and open some discussion and where do we want to go next, and then ask what are those concrete next steps that we want to be taking. As a reminder, our strategic plan. In our strategic plan, there's a link to it in here for anybody who wants to look at it later or go more in depth. Talks a lot around, we've shifted away from purely a test score for our learners because our learners are so much more than a test score. We've shifted that to really be the experience that they're having in school. And how are they telling us that they feel about school for the success in life through college and career readiness building block. And we got to hear tonight all the nice progress we're making in the financial stability and efficiency building block. And now we're going to talk about some of the progress we're making in this building block. But part of that is that experience kids have in school. Are they having college level experiences during their time in our schools? Are they having opportunities to do public demonstrations of the learning and connect to community experts? And lots of those opportunities can be found not only in the classroom when we're doing our equity through deeper learning work, but they can also be found in sports and extracurriculars. And so it's important for us to start figuring out where that plays a role for us in our strategic plan. We don't have anything specifically addressing those two items in the strategic plan right now, but there are many districts around the nation that have very strong policies and beliefs around students being involved in an extracurricular, whichever one that is, music, sports, theater, clubs, every season of every school year, all year round, as part of their strategic plan, as part of the goal of what they want for all learners in school. And so that's part of the direction that we want to talk about tonight. Is that something we want to add to our strategic plan? And then how do we take some next steps to get there? There's a link in this website, I'm not going to go through it right now, that talks about kind of the benefits of extracurriculars for learners. And I will share this and we'll put it out on the website when we're done tonight. But for a minute, I want to pass it over to Bill, because I know this has been a real passion area of Bill's as the chair of our committee. And so I'm going to pass it over to Bill, who's going to share some more information with us just on some background and philosophically why some of this work is so important to him.
Hello. This is interesting because we really didn't discuss what exactly I was going to talk about. So I wonder if you're just really going crazy.
Swing it, Bill. Swing it. You got it.
No, what she just put up there really shows me that we're really on the same page. And first and foremost, I just want to ask this question, and I want you guys to think about this question as, I kind of go through. I have a little bit of a PowerPoint presentation, and I'm not a PowerPoint person. So, bear with me in this. My wife's right next to me, so she's my technical assistant here for the time being. So this is just a question that I'd like to pose to you guys, and just think about this question. How much would you pay for a magic potion that would guarantee to improve our kids' citizenship, sportsmanship, GPAs, self-discipline, and physical and emotional wellness? So think about that as we talk about, as Deidre and Shelly talk about what they talk about and what I'm going to go through here now as well. As I enter, my last year in my second term on the school board, I reflect on some of the things that we've done in the 5 and going on my 6th year. And we've been through a lot of change, a lot of positive change. We've had some crises that we turned into successes, and we're going through a pandemic as we speak. And I think we're doing a fantastic job. So I just want to thank Marty for his leadership. And I want to thank Deidre and Shelly for, I believe, being on the same page about what we're going to talk about tonight. It's no better timing than right now to talk about this stuff in the middle of a pandemic. When in today's day and age, our kids are living a much more sedentary lifestyle. Technology has allowed us to be at our fingertips to be able to connect with people. So it's limiting our children's participation in athletics. And, athletics has played a very important role in my life, as it did in Deidre's life, as she mentioned with the start of her story. I go back to thinking about my high school life and my, growing up in West Dallas, and knowing that I'm a kid that probably wouldn't have gone to college had it not been for athletic opportunities. And Jeff Sickage, as I said many a times, he was a coach and a mentor that I think about when Deidre was talking about her story about her father. So it's important. It's extremely important. So let me try to get to this little. Can I share my screen here? So what I'm going to try to do is tie together how we focus and look at aligning, what Deidre said, our strategic plan and how we view and how we support and how we look at athletics and youth and extracurricular activities. I don't want to leave that out, in our district and how we, and how it benefits our kids' lives. Okay. So, all right, Missy, Where are you at? Okay. Mission statement. Every day, the West Dallas West Milwaukee School District focuses on equity through deeper learning, fosters a sense of belonging, and educates the whole child so that every learner achieves success. WAWM high schools have a tradition of excellence as comprehensive high schools, providing a well-rounded, high-quality educational experience for all students. We encourage students to take advantage of opportunities in academics, athletics, music, arts, languages, career, and technical education, theater, service clubs, honor societies, and social clubs. And Deidre already showed our strategic plan, so great minds think alike, I think, right? And I highlighted a couple things that I think are important. We want our learners to be able to demonstrate skills in content mastery, communication, collaboration, and you can read all of that stuff as we go forward. I don't have to read everything to you, but I want you to look at the list of what we measure. We measure social awareness, we measure grit, we measure curiosity, we measure growth mindset, classroom effort, self-regulation, exclusionary discipline incidents, graduation rate, and increasing our attendance. We want to decrease the number of resident students who apply for open enrollment out to other districts. We also want to work with our high schools to determine obstacles to participation, extracurricular activities, clubs, sports, music, and develop ways to address them. So this is the start of those conversations and how we're going to do that. All right. We also have, how do I get rid of this, Missy? Sorry. I want to go to the next one now. Panorama. Sorry. Bear with me. Okay, right there. No. No.
Oh, go back. Yeah. Now you want to click on there?
No.
Click on there.
All right. We have Panorama. How do I do this? Sign in with Google, right?
You can click on it. Go to my Google account. Hold on. Relax. There you go.
All right. We measure these within Panorama. We can track. You know, what good is data if we don't track it, right? And use that data to help us. So some of the things that we're looking at, sixth grade through 12th grade, classroom effort, we're at 60%. Since 2020 spring, we're down 2. Social awareness, grit, growth mindset, curiosity, emotional regulation. If you look at this chart at the moment, it's not painting a very pretty picture. But we have the ability to track. Our deeper learning competencies. We enjoy content mastery, effective communication, critical thinking, problem solving, collaboration, self-directed learning, and academic mindset. Sports and athletics. In the research that I've done and the articles that I've looked at, and this has probably been about a 2-year process of me searching, looking, coming up with ways. The thing that always comes back to me are the essential life skills that athletics and youth sports participation provide, and extracurricular activities. Effort, determination, self-discipline, teamwork, time management. Those words look extremely familiar to me when I look at what our strategic plan and our deeper learning competencies are. Athletics and benefits to mental health. There's a correlation between exercise and mental health. Students who exercise 6 to 7 days a week said 25% said they felt sad for 2 weeks or more in the past 12 months, compared to 35.7%. So exercise and participation in athletic sports provides mental health, benefits to mental health. Children with who reported no exercise were twice as likely to have mental health problems. So there's a ton of data out there that shows that athletics and exercise provide these benefits. People who participate in high school athletics are less likely to smoke, drink, have higher attendance, and are more likely to graduate. Organized sports activities help children develop and improve cognitive skills. So again, all of these surveys and all of these things that I've read show everything to do with the benefits that align with our deeper learning competencies and our strategic plan. I thought this was amazing. A survey of 400 female corporate executives found 94% played a sport. 94% of 400. That's amazing. And that's what we want to do. 61% say sports contributed to their career success. So when you break down our district and how we look at it through an equity lens, currently 50% of our students are ethnic minority groups, and it breaks it down to how we have it. This is directly from our website. 60% of students come from economically disadvantaged families. 60%. So when you think about providing opportunities for youth to participate in youth activities, are we doing that? Are we providing all of our students with those opportunities? Youth athletic participation is declining at 34% in homes with incomes less than 25,000 home income. And youth athletic participation is increasing 69% from homes with over $100,000 of incomes. So this tells two stories. There is declining participation, but it is much more prevalent in minority and economically disadvantaged families. Contrary to that, it's improving by 69% in perceived richer, wealthier families. So that tells us that in low-income areas, we're decline. That's where the decline in the participation is, not in the richer, more wealthy families. Low income relates to lack of participation. Young people in low-income families face another developmental gap, just like technology. The sports arms race, as they call it, in certain articles that I read, it's becoming more and more expensive to participate in youth sports. So people coming from low-income housing, low-income families are not being provided that opportunity. School-based athletics. The data shows that it represents a stronger community overall. There's something to be said to playing and showing pride for your high school or your grade school or your middle school. Real quick, high school athletics. If we increase our youth participation and focus on how do we get kids to participate, what's our strategy? How do we promote? How do we market? How do we go to market? What do we provide? That's going to increase our participation once we get into high school athletics. And where we have struggled in high school athletics in getting participation numbers directly results in being competitive in high school athletics. If you can't support a freshman JV high school organization in, let's say, basketball, you're going to put your seniors and your juniors at a disadvantage, and that's going to drive the numbers down because people aren't going to want to participate if they're not competitive. Nobody likes to play and get beat every time they're out on the court. It's a pathway to college for kids from low-income families. Division I and Division II schools in 1990 contributed $250 million in full and partial scholarships. That number is over $3 billion today. So money is available. So one thing, how do we drive our kids with that opportunity, if they participate in high school, to potentially have an avenue to college money, that sort of thing. And this is a little chart, everything I've been saying leads to less smoking, 40% higher test grades, 15% more likely to go to college, lower levels of depression, higher levels of self-esteem, higher percentage of annual earnings, lower health costs, more productive at work. So where do we go from here? Who do we reach out to? How do we move on and how do we get help? It's always about money, and what we've come from with the money situation, we know money's not pouring out to us. There's organizations that I found that can help us. I got to go backwards here. Sorry. This Aspen Institute Project Play, Shelley may know something about it. It's all about getting community-based youth athletics in the community. It's perfect for a community like ours, where we're seeing communities like Heartland and Mequon and Brookfield and New Berlin being able to put their kids into programs that they can spend thousands and thousands of dollars, which is providing avenues to college and scholarships. They're getting looked at more. We need to figure out an approach as a community, and this Project Play, it's phenomenal. And this is something I think we should absolutely look at. So that's basically all I got for you. The importance and starting the conversation and where we go from here.
So thank you, Bill. And I'm going to also share that when we talked about this in our Life Readiness Through College and Career Preparation Committee, Kristen and Christine both also shared around other co-curricular events that they had been involved in school. And for Kristen in particular, it was band. And I know for Gary, as you guys have worked on the recreation committee and as you're the chair of that committee, you've had some of those experiences as well. So I don't know if you want to jump in and share some of that, just in how that can contribute to our overall school experience.
Sure. Can everybody hear me? Okay. Yeah, I didn't know if I was supposed to speak tonight, so I didn't prepare anything, but I'm going to just tell a couple stories just to say that athletics are a big part of this and are very important. And there are non-athletics, the arts. And so I'm going to tell a couple band stories. So starting in 2010, my daughter, who was in 6th grade at West Milwaukee Intermediate, joined Lancer Band. And for those who remember, Lancer Band was the school district's marching band. 6 weeks in the summer, kids would go to Frank Lloyd Wright for 4 hours a day. They would practice marching for 2 hours a day, and they would practice performing their pieces for 2 hours a day. And then they would perform throughout the region in various parades, mostly Independence Day parades. But they went to, I think, is it Fish Days in Port Washington? But the first one was always in Waukegan, Illinois. And everybody, Waukegan was special because it was also the first one of the year. So it was exciting for the kids to get out there and perform. And in Waukegan, it went down, I can't remember if that's Lake Drive in Waukegan, but it's Highway 41. So you start in downtown, they would march through a residential neighborhood and then go to a park where there was a celebration afterwards. Well, one year, the band director had received a letter that Lancer Band was not going to be invited to Waukegan due to budget cuts. Then a week later, the band director got another letter. Lancer Band was going to participate in Waukegan because one of the residents who lived on Lake Drive, a private business owner, Lancer Band from West Dallas, West Milwaukee School District, was his favorite part of the parade. He personally paid over $1,000 to have Lancer Band come participate at the Waukegan parade. And after that happened, the Waukegan parade planners made it a point to continue to bring Lancer Band down to their parade, even as they were making budget cuts. So that shows that strong programs, and we have a strong music program in our district. Now, Lancer Band isn't what it used to be. It's gone away. But if we could bring something like that back, I mean, the benefits it made in promoting our community, showing that we have a strong arts program in our community, it really, I mean, you can't pay for that kind of advertising. And a second story I want to share, and this is something I've always thought about if we could get this going in our school district. A number of years ago, I was watching a special on public TV, and a Madison area school teacher, music teacher, noticed that he had some kids that weren't participating in band or orchestra. Didn't know why, but he noticed these kids had rhythm. They could tap on a desk, they could tap on a garbage can. So he took advantage of that and developed a drum line, a way for kids with musical talent to participate. No other instruments, no orchestra, no band. These were just a drum line. So these were kids who had musical talent, but never had another way to express that. Now they do. Now those kids have that. that would be another kind of thing. I think that if we promote more extracurricular activities in district, we could bring something like that to our school district.
Awesome. Thanks, Gary, for sharing that and for representing, again, those co-curriculars. So we each have kind of our own stories in our passion area when it comes to this. So we wanted to share as well just some kind of current statistics. What do we offer to learners right now? And where are some of their opportunities? And so for extracurriculars or co-curriculars is really what we should be calling them. We'll work on our language on that one. One of the things we offer at every single school are clubs. So these clubs range from cooking to Future Business Leaders of America, FBLA, to Harry Potter clubs, to Magic, the card clubs, which I did not know what it was until I taught a team of math and science teachers at UWM who filled me in about how amazing that is. Legos, robotics, we have cooking clubs, we have all kinds of things that are going on at each school site. Some of the schools have recess clubs where kids are doing some investigation. Every single one of our schools, elementary through high school, has somewhere between 3 and 27 clubs that they offer at the school site. They always obviously adjust at each school site depending on the size of the school. And every single one of those clubs currently has 10 to 15 learners in each. But where some of those clubs come from now is really just a teacher saying, I don't know, I'd like to sponsor a cooking club, or hey, what if we had a school newspaper? Jefferson has a club with a school newspaper. So each school has kind of it comes from somewhere, or sometimes high schools in particular comes from learners saying, we'd really like to develop a club around this, and could there be a sponsor for those clubs? So we've got anywhere from 3 at each school all the way up to 27. With 10 to 15 learners that are participating in each one of those. Typically, those are things that meet for short periods of time, anywhere from 6 weeks to a whole semester, and then they move on to the next thing. Currently in band and orchestra, some of the elementary numbers are from last year, as our numbers are a bit skewed this year with getting new students to take on instruments in the midst of all of what's going on. So last year in elementary, we had 138 students who participated in band at our elementary schools. We had 199 students participate in orchestra, so that's what starts after 3rd grade. And then 385 students participate in prelude strings, which is 4K through 3rd grade. So orchestra is 4th and 5th grade. So that's a large number of our learners who are participating in something at that early age. In intermediate school, is 372 right now that take band and 198 that take orchestra. And then by high school, we go down to 153 that are involved in one of our bands. We have quite a few that go on. And then 83 students who continue on in orchestra. And so some of that is because learners are starting to pursue more things, and there's more options, and there's different things that they would like to take during the day. But some of that is just narrowing down on kind of what their focus is and what their interest is. And then we also have a very robust theater program in our school district as well, that this year got creative in how to put on radio plays and other things to give additional learners those opportunities to participate. I will pass it over to Shelley to start talking about kind of some of what we've seen within our rec programs in the last couple of years.
Thank you, Deidre, and good evening, everyone. So as you can see from our data here, we have been seeing a downward trend, and unfortunately, we really just don't have a good way of capturing data to know why. We've been trying to start to look at kind of the grade level cohorts and following students through our district, and as district enrollment starts to decline, is that reflective here, or is it participation that's reflective? So working to get some better data in youth sports, but it's not exclusive to West Allis West Milwaukee. It's not exclusive to Wisconsin. All research statistics show that nationally they're seeing huge declines in youth sports, and they're seeing those declines at younger and younger ages. Then you can see our youth enrichment and what is enrichment. In those numbers are included our dance classes. We have a number of art classes, whether it's drawing or painting, a number of STEAM classes and engineering, babysitting. So just all the other private music lessons, any kind of special interest type of activity is included in enrichment. And there, I we haven't seen huge decreases. And we didn't include obviously 2020 data because we really don't have good data. We're in the kind of midst of 2020 programming, and then, things fell apart. So even though we still are offering some of those programs, it's just really not good data for us to use. So kind of where are we at? And I know Bill mentioned this earlier. So a few years ago, we did a survey for youth sports, and some of the feedback we got was around kind of how we structure teams, use of volunteers, lack of volunteers, and some of that we believe may have impacted some of our athletes' participation in sports. So when we hired Sam, and Sam's been with us just a little over a year now, part of his charge was to really look at our youth sports. So we've been doing a lot of work to create a vision for our youth sports. And as part of that vision, you'll see here, we want to change the culture of youth sports in our community. And through best research and best practices for all that are involved. It starts at the top with the leadership and the administrators, but where we're really finding the huge focus then that trickles down into coaches training, making sure coaches are prepared. It's very comparable to teaching in the education setting, and making sure that those are positive experiences for all. But they're also a huge piece, and as many of you know, youth sports, a significant portion is parents. And so also creating some education pieces for parents that are rooted in what we believe will be our program's philosophy and values. We want to be the preferred choice for youth sports in the community, and not sort of the alternative or the only other thing, or the because I didn't make this team or that club. We want to be the preferred choice for all. And we also want to make sure that we're providing equitable opportunities and access. And some of that has to go along with some of the research that Bill's done. And for our students that are disadvantaged economically, youth sports nationwide is like an $8 billion business. And when you look at
17 billion,
probably, yeah. When you look at that, I mean, that does not align with, and club sports fees do not align with where our students are at. So, but we also want to make sure that those opportunities are for all, not those that maybe just are really skilled. Because the other thing we look at is this: youth sports should be a lifelong. And all of our extracurriculars, we want to create lifelong learners, lifelong lovers of whatever their skill interest area is. And you'll see that also reflected and we've seen too that we're not seeing the amount of adults coming forward to volunteer to coach. And I know Justin and Greg can probably speak to this. There are national shortages of sport officials. And I'm sure if you ask some of those sport officials, were they involved with sport as a child in some way, shape, or form? I'm sure there's a correlation and connection. So that's some of what we're looking to do as well, so that all can participate and all can participate together. So we've been doing a lot of research. I know Bill referenced the Aspen Youth Institute and their Project Play. We're also looking at the National Alliance for Youth Sports, Positive Coaching Alliance, Changing the Game Project, and the Inside Out Initiative. And a lot of those organizations have some common themes. They all kind of started out of the call for this reduction in participation, that youth sports has become a business and really is no longer child-focused, child-centered, and changing that to put the play back in the hands of the kids and take it away from the adults. The other huge focus of a lot of them, it really truly is about the adults that they're working with, and making sure that coaches that you're putting out there are trained, prepared, and have some background education and knowledge on how to work with kids to make it a positive experience. And one case study that we're really looking at, and Sam's been doing a lot of meetings and has really gotten the attention of some kind of national experts. Nate Miller, who's been involved, I believe, with both the Positive Coaching Alliance and Changing the Game. And there's some other people involved as well, and their names are escaping me right now. But Nate Miller worked in Appleton Parks and Rec, and when you look at Appleton demographically, there's a lot of similarities between them, their community, and our community. They were where we are at now, where they saw a huge decline, but by creating a values-based youth sports program and really revitalizing it, they have seen in those 6 years a 75% increase in their participation in all sports. And that's the other thing, conversations we have often. We want to see participation and increase in all of our program areas, but specifically when it comes to sports, not just kind of our primary sports, but all sports, some of the non-traditional sports, and as well as opportunities for girls in sports to increase as well. So kind of how they did it, just want to touch base quickly. It really came down to creating core values and a lot of getting buy-in. And it was basically, you're either in with us and believe in our core values, or we invite you to go elsewhere. And those core values were built around inclusion, balance, and when it comes to balance, it's family balance and life balance, that kids should have the opportunity to be a kid, to choose things other than just sports, to be with their families, that sport would not be the focal point of their life. It should just be one part of it. It should be fun, and that there should be some skill development involved. So that's kind of the direction we're looking to go with our youth sports and community-wide, and working together with everyone. So I think now I'm going to pass it on to our high schools to talk a little bit about their current participation trends.
All right, I just wanted to, Justin and I did some work just going back, looking at some of our numbers in our programs. And we're pretty unique. We were just talking, we just went through this realignment task force to try and see if we could position ourselves better in football. And what we found out during that process, we're pretty unique. There's only about, I think it was 20 or 21 school districts with multiple high schools. So we're kind of, we network with them at the high school level a little bit, but we're kind of unique in this realm of sports too. So when we look at our schools, you can see our participation kind of in the last 3 years has gone down a little bit. And then of course in 1920, the numbers are pretty skewed. We didn't have spring last year, but at the same time, these numbers also reflect not the total number of students involved in athletics, it's the number of athletic spots taken. So there's a number of 2 or 3 sport athletes. I think at Hale, I think I've kind of narrowed down. We got probably between 400, 425 students take part in athletics in our school most years. So that's what these numbers reflect on this screen. And then this is the junior programs. Again, I'm kind of new to the district, just trying to look at these numbers. But when I see numbers in youth sports, and I've been around athletics for a long time, and I really believe the youth is where we need to focus, because I want as many kids coming through our doors as freshmen to give them that opportunity to figure it out. And when we're in youth, we don't want to ruin any of their experiences. But obviously you see some, we're not quite sure what we're doing in baseball right now in some of the youth programs. That the organization down there is, to me, it's disappointing, because there's so many good baseball people in West Allis and so many good organizations between Little League, the rec department, and we have to, work at that a little bit just for a direction. That might be a model that we can actually look at it, how we can grow a partnership in a community too, which I think is kind of an advantage coming out of that. But as you can see, the numbers in basketball and a little difference at the schools based on participation rates also.
There we go. I think that's the last of our slides that we wanted to share this evening. So thank you to Justin and Greg and Shelley and team who put together some of that information for us. And so what we're really looking for tonight, normally this would have been just really 2 committees getting together, but the possibility that we may have had a quorum if we had all been present had us bringing it forward to the whole board for a workshop, which we also were excited about because we wanted to get some input from the full board as far as what is the direction that we want to go next? Is this something that we want to be more of a focal point of our strategic plan? Is this making sure every student has the opportunity to participate in a co-curricular and extracurricular activity? Are there things that we want to be doing specific to sports to increase participation in youth sports? So we are looking for some kind of feedback, discussion, and some direction next from our board, and then we will get to work on what to do with all of that next.
Ryan?
Press the wrong button. So yeah, I agree that this is an area that definitely needs some focus. My background's been more on the sports side. I was heavily involved in Little League, and one of my biggest frustrations was that we would have kids leave West Dallas and play sports elsewhere because they didn't feel that the options were there for them. And there were families even with Little League that had challenges being able to afford it or make the time for it or get the rides for it or any of those things. So I think exploring options that we can do to increase the participation within West Dallas would be great. I think when you have, and it goes with other extracurriculars as well, but when you have successful programs, it breeds community pride, something to be excited about, whether that's community-wise, at the school level, whatever the case may be. And it's hard to have those successful programs when you have people going out to play elsewhere. And sometimes that will lead to kids leaving the district because they'll make friends on a travel or a select team, and they'll want to continue to play with those individuals at the high school level. So yeah, I would concur that it's an area that we need to put some focus on and build toward trying to find a way to remedy that.
Jeff, you had your hand up?
Yes, I was just going to say, you know, as a former FIAD teacher and 20-year coach in the district, and probably the most senior board member we have, this is the first board meeting we have ever discussed something like this and not just received, well, this many people did this many people did that. It's the first time we've sat down and questioned ourselves as what can we do to make this better or improve numbers. So I want to congratulate both committees for this workshop. This has been great. And a special thanks to Bill for being nice to me.
Noah?
So I definitely don't think that there's any dispute about the data. I think that there's been years and years and years of data that says that kids who are participating in some sort of activity outside of school as part of the district has, you know, just succeeds more in life. And so I definitely think that trying to find ways to help with that is only going to serve the population better overall. I think the biggest issue, the number one issue that from conversations that I've had since I've been on the board is access for people in mainly to and from home, and being able to make the meetings that oftentimes take place after school or on weekends, and trying to juggle, when you're talking about economically disadvantaged families, a job and also trying to make the practices. And so, you know, I've floated ideas like, can we work with busing companies to try to figure out ways to get, you know, have late buses, you know, that can drop people at certain places, or things of that nature, so that it's not trying to get family members who don't have older siblings that can drive their siblings to and from school, or because they themselves are working, or other things. I think the access issue in physically being able to attend and stay late after school, or come to a weekend practice or a weekend game or, you know, meeting or whatever it happens to be. I think I think fixing that issue and trying to address that might get us a long way into getting more people to be able to participate.
No, I would agree with you too. There's definitely, you know, issues with boy, you know, when things end, when school ends at 3, and you have to go home, do something, leave, whatever, and try to come back at 6 for practice when you don't have reliable transportation. Mom's not home to drive you. You're too young to drive yourself. You don't have a car. Too cold to ride your bike. Right? That's when the kids start to drop off. Right? You know, there's a lot of that, and I think that's definitely part of it. And I also think part of just we're at the disadvantage of geography. A lot of our high-end complexes are on the very far west side of the community. That's not easily accessible for a good chunk of our kids. And that's, I mean, we're stuck with some of those things, but then what do we do about it? What other facilities can we renovate? Can we add to? Can we do different things? Can we modify? Can we offer different solutions so that there's more things to do, you know, in order to have more access points across the community, because we're stuck with the geography of what we have.
And it's one of the things that we talked about in some small groups as well, were the idea that what part does some of this play in the discussions that the FACT team is currently having? Because there are lots of communities, as Greg and Justin were sharing, that are one high school communities that drive much more of the competition and things like that. And whether that's something we want the FACT team to be talking about and considering, where renovation to make more accessible fields and participation would be something that we want that factored in, whether it would be a lean towards a 2 high schools, large comprehensive high school plus a project-based learning high school, or a 1 larger comprehensive high school system. I mean, there's some factors in some of what we're talking about and how to add to that could be things we want to take to that team for some consideration.
And I just have one comment.
Christine, go ahead first, and then Bill, you're next.
Thanks. Sorry, I'm having internet connection, so if this is spotty, that's why. Shelley, I don't know if you remember receiving an email communication or a phone call from a student out at West Milwaukee. This was one of subject that he did for his project-based learning. My internet just froze up again.
We could hear you.
We can still hear you, Christine, so you're good. Just keep plowing through.
Okay, good. I don't know if, but I was like, oh, wow, this is real life merit to it, you know, and it was a student who wanted to be connected to the rec center. And that was his idea, was how can we that want to be involved, you know, in a sport program and provide them with transportation from the middle school to the rec center, and then, you know, maybe back again. I don't know if you recall that or not. I don't recall his name. I think he was in 7th grade, and that would have been 2018.
Yeah, they were, I think that's it was part of some project-based learning. And I think at that time, because we were in the middle of construction, you know, it was a lot of, he was doing some research for a project, and but yeah, that was, you know, part of that discussion. And I would concur with, you know, the comments that are being made. Access to is a huge challenge and a huge barrier for a lot of our families to participate. So yeah, something to think about.
I'm gonna add a little bit to, just again, I'm a former extracurricular junkie in school. I will probably tell you that when I graduated, I had the most amount of stuff by my name of anybody else in my senior class. And I'm sure if any of you guys have paid attention to me the last couple of years, you're probably not surprised by that. But, and as the mother of an extracurricular kid as well, my God, I completely forgot what I was going to say. So I was just so excited about telling everybody something, and I don't even remember what it was. So I'm on to something else. Wow, completely. That's what happens when you're involved in doing extracurriculars. Your brain freezes.
You're passionate. You love it. I see that.
Oh, I know what it was. It's about the parents. All about the parents. So going back to that is, I think about, what do you know as a parent about the group or sport or club that your kid is going to be in? And the likelihood is little, right? There's not a lot of that outreach that goes out there to families. You know, involved with, like, you know, with junior football, I know most of our coaches do a parent meeting before the season starts, like at the first practice, right? Half of them don't come. Like my husband, who coaches youth football, he started to record the meeting so that he could send them out to the parents via email, because half of them don't come to the meetings, right? But that's part of it, is not having the access to the parents. What is the expectation, and what do you need to do, and what does your kid need to do, and how do we hold kids accountable, and what are you getting into, right? It's almost something that has to start like when they're in kindergarten. Like, here's all the stuff that's going to be available. Here's what's going to be asked. Here's what's going to happen. Here's the next progression, right? And that's a big commitment. That's where a lot of that stuff comes from. Everything, even from, your kid's going to be in forensics, right? I don't even know if we have forensics, but like for forensics, like this is what forensics looks like, and here's what the expectation is, and you're going to write a bust to Delavan Darien, and you're going to do these speeches, and this is what's going to happen, and to kind of know what this is all about, because kids aren't going to be active in something if they don't understand what it is, but also their parents aren't going to be encouraging them either. I'm one of those parents that I ask, well, what about this, and have you done this, and is this available to you? But if you don't have that experience and you don't have access to a library of information, you're not going to be encouraging your children. You're not going to make that extra sacrifice or help to find that ride share or whatever that is to get your kid to the thing. So I think that's part of it too, is our investment in this in the future is constant, regular communication about that, explanations, definitions, connecting the dots, whether that's at a school by school level, whether that's district material, whether that's coach by coach, I'm not sure, but something like that. I think that helps. Parents need to kind of understand what their kid wants to do and help them find their passions. Gary?
Yeah. So a couple of questions. Well, one question I wanted to ask was, as part of looking into it, so I'll have an athletic related question and maybe a non-athletic related question. So as we dig into this and look at this and then move forward with this, are we going to look at potentially restructuring the way we do things in our youth sports? Bill, about a year and a half or so ago, we touched base on something. I had watched John McGivern Around the Corner. He was in Menominee, Wisconsin. And they interviewed on the sports segment, they interviewed the football coach. And the football coach talked about they have one of the most unique football programs in the entire state of Wisconsin. They do no contact until 8th grade. They put pads on in 8th grade, but they don't tackle until 9th grade. They had, at the time of that interview, 2018, 100 freshmen going out for football. A school of 900 kids had 100 freshmen out for football, almost 180 in their entire football program. So being open to maybe looking at schools like that and seeing why does a school like that, a small school, have 180 kids out for football? That's a large number for a district like that. And then second, one of my observations, my kids are older, so my observations about youth sports go back more than a decade. But one of the things I think that we need to overcome, and it's going to be a communications effort, is some really bad experiences that previous students have had in our youth sports programs, whether it was bad coaching experiences. But I used to look at the number of kids that were fantastic baseball players that didn't even play baseball in, like the West Allis Wolves, didn't play baseball in high school. These were phenomenal athletes, but they would hear about bad experiences that families had, so they didn't join in. Kids that could have played football, same thing, they had heard bad experiences. So those kind of communications continue over time. So I think that's one of the things we need to do as a effort in this, is to show that what happened years ago isn't happening now.
Fair enough.
I think one of the things that it would be a good starting point, me and Shelley kind of had talked about this, and she had mentioned kind of an advisory type of council where we have our athletic directors and some coaches, some administration, recreation, and really dig into these types of conversations, because I think first and foremost, we really got to determine, a monetary amount that we're willing to kind of go with. We don't have to have a final dollar amount, but I think, and you can correct me if I'm wrong, but I've talked to Caitlin. We don't really have anywhere in our budgets a line item for athletics. You know, at the high school level, it's, you know, can we get uniforms this year? You got to raise the money this year. We can't get them. Doesn't fit in the budget. So I think we have to have some commitment when it comes to athletics on how we value it. And once we kind of figure that out, you know, all of these other things are going to fall into place. You know, it is the coaching, the coaches, you know, years ago, we split to the junior Huskies and the junior Bulldogs. And if you look 3 years later at the data, has that helped us? Has that helped our participation numbers to combine or to separate the junior Huskies? And I was a big proponent of the separation, you know, and you look at it today, we want to get kids involved. And I don't think our high school coaches are coming down and helping our youth programs the way maybe we had envisioned it to begin with. But a lot of what kind of started this thought process for me is when our athletic director at Hale retired, and it opened up the opportunity to maybe reevaluate the role of the athletic director and how do they operate. You know, in years past, our athletic directors have always been a manager of the program, schedule the buses, the paperwork. You know, we need an athletic director. No, I'm not disrespecting. My vision of an athletic director is somebody who's in charge of their own department, who's in the hallways recruiting kids to play, who's interacting with the elementary schools and the middle schools and getting kids involved. That's the type of person we want as our athletic directors. We don't want them coaching those kids, but we want those guys and girls to be putting the people in place that are going to do the coaching, because that's what they do. They're athletic directors. So, you know, I think by starting with some kind of advisory board and figuring out what the roles are, is, you know, and then maybe the dollar amount, or, you know, how do we value it? I mean, I know there's not millions of dollars out there for us to go out and just change everything, and that's not going to happen. But, you know, and then we figure out our benchmarks on how we want to increase, you know, what is a reasonable goal for increasing participation. We have percentages to increase our grit. You know, how do we come up with that percentage? And now we have panorama to say, hey, you know, these fourth graders at, you know, Mitchell Elementary School, we got 6 kids participating in this program. We're monitoring them. Now when we take these surveys, look at all these 6 kids have improved. And now we can monitor all the kids that participate in all extracurricular activities and actually do something with that data. So how do we get there? I mean, this is wonderful that we're sitting here talking about this, because like Jeff said, he's, you know, the 5 years I've been around, it hasn't happened. And I think this is a great thing. So thank you.
Go ahead.
Oh, you broke up a little bit, so I didn't hear you. I think too, there has to be if we're looking at the youth sports going into the high school, there has to be a departmental philosophy on what is going to be the purpose of the younger. Is it to win? I'm sorry, but that's not where I'm at. I want those kids getting as much playtime, all the kids, not just the 5 nuggets, because that turns off a lot of kids when, well, I'm not one of the nuggets, so I'll get in the last 2 minutes or whatever. They need to learn the basics so that by the time they keep growing up through the program, when you get to be a junior or senior and it's varsity football, then it's more about winning, not having to win, but you're striving to win. The word win shouldn't even be used in the lower programs from my point. It should be learning and teaching. And you're not really a coach at those levels. You're teaching skills and fundamentals, regardless of the sport.
Can I jump in there just for a second? Is that okay?
Yeah.
Yeah, so I think that's been some of the discussion that we've had in our committee for sure, is that idea that do we have a philosophical approach to co-curriculars? And that would include, what are we looking for from youth sports? And what is the thing we're trying to do? And the one thing I would say about the budget and looking at the budget is, first, I think we need to figure out what it is we're trying to do, and then how much would that cost? versus saying we're going to add money to something, but yet we don't have like a strategic direction on what our next steps are. So that's some of what we've talked about in our committee. And really what we were looking for tonight was, is there, widespread board support for us going back and doing a lot of planning between the groups and between whether it's an advisory committee or something else, to come back to the board and say, hey, this would be kind of action steps that we'd like to see over the next course of the next couple of years for all co-curriculars, or for increasing opportunities for our young learners and all those pieces. And then this would be some of the dollars we'd like to then associate to that through our overall school budgets. So that's kind of, exactly, I think you're all getting at really what we were hoping for tonight, was just some general feedback on whether that's a direction we want to go. And then give us some space and time to figure out all of these details that, and listing of the questions that are all now down on my piece of paper, so that we can go back and start to sort through what is our philosophical approach to this, and when do we start exposing families in our community to some of what we're trying to do with some of those activities.
Yeah, because to me, those lower levels, the whole emphasis should be on learning and having fun. Because when I used to do that, I coached in the rec department when my kids weren't in it. In fact, when I coached Bill's team, I was just a former athlete there helping. I had no kids on the team, or nephews or nieces or any of that. It was just about, let's learn the game and let's have fun. Don't worry about winning. There's going to be time enough for that the rest of your life. And I think that turns off a lot of, I don't know about parents, but I think it turns off a lot about kids. They just want to have fun. My grandkids are young. Now they play stuff that's not at school. They play hockey and stuff at the Pettit. But after one of their games, I'll go, did you have fun? Oh, you did? Oh, then you won. That's what it's about.
Gary?
I just wanted to touch on something Jeff said, that going back to what I said before, we had a history of our youth sports participation, whether it was through the rec or through some of the other programs like the Wolves. They were focused on the W. They weren't focused on teaching kids the fundamentals, letting kids have fun. It was all about the W. So I agree with Jeff. We got to get away from that focus on win, win, win when you're a youth. It's about teaching kids and getting them to enjoy the game. So maybe they'll want to develop further skills, and they might be able to be, participate in an athletic varsity program. But the way we've done it in the past, we've just, by focusing on the win, we've lost so many kids that could have excelled in our athletics. And Deidre had actually touched on something else I was going to say about looking at all extracurriculars, because I don't want this effort just to focus on sports. Things like band, when a marching band teaches a lot of things. It teaches discipline. To be able to march in line and play an instrument at the same time, you need focus, you need discipline. So there are other activities out there besides sports. So I just don't want this to get lost in sports.
Thanks, Gary. Noah?
As a not too long and distant past recreation coach, I will say that the instructions that I was given is that it's not about winning. In fact, we don't even keep track of the score. It's just, even the kids try to do it, but I say, oh, no, it doesn't matter. This is, it doesn't matter if we're up by 20 or 40, we're not paying attention to that. Did you have fun? And that's always the question that I ask them. And I do think that, at least in my experience with recreation, that is definitely the emphasis, making sure the kids are learning the rules and understanding the positions and whatever sport that you're coaching them in, and then trying to ensure that everyone is participating at every position that you are responsible for. That has been drilled to me in the years I have been a recreation coach. And I definitely think, at least in recreation, that is, the W is not the foremost thing that are on the minds. At least that's not what coaches are being told. Now, I have witnessed coaches that ignore that, but I do know that is the instruction that is being given to, at least in the recreation department, those coaches. So I think that, at least at rec, that fundamental goal is definitely there. What other private organizations are doing, I guess that's a little bit harder for us to maybe to work through. But we certainly as a district can come forward with goals and what we are expecting those students who are participating in youth sports are going to, come across and experience, and what they should, just like we graduate people and they're supposed to have these sets of skills. We can come up with a list of things that in our youth sports, we want our students to be coming out from our youth sports before they move into middle school or high school. These sets of things we want them to be able to achieve, each and every one of them. And that is how we design our coaching structure and our mentality for it. Another thing that I think would be useful in this is seeing how we might be able to engage city leadership, all 4 of the cities for which we participate in trying to help us in our goal in increasing the participation. It is obviously going to only help each one of those municipalities that we have a foothold in to have people who are participating in these things. So how can we engage those city leadership groups to help us in our endeavor to increase participation in co-curricular activities?
So,
what I'll say is that I think we can kind of do both. And when I say both, I think we can find a way, because what will happen if we aren't providing competitive for the high end kids in our area, they're going to leave us regardless. Okay, so if you have kids, let's say basketball is an example, or baseball is a better example, because there's such a wide range of skill, at certain ages, that if you only provide, we want to provide for everybody, but I think we can provide opportunities to field competitive teams that might be able to compete outside of our community as well. And setting up some kind of system where maybe that's the ultimate goal. And I look at, I see Steve and I think about Whitnall, and I look at Whitnall's youth program right now. A lot of our West Dallas kids go and compete at Whitnall because Whitnall has a heck of a youth program and a good model to follow. They do have kids that play outside of their program at other levels, and you're going to have that everywhere. But I think our community is much different. We're not going to have the numbers of kids leaving us because of economic issues. I think the big thing is to get them participating and then figure out a way how the kids that, if you want to call the cream rises to the top, how you kind of fold those kids into maybe an opportunity elsewhere. There are models and there is the ability to kind of do both, I think.
You're muted.
Muted, sorry about that. I haven't done that at all today. So Marty, I don't know if you want to jump in at all, but what I'm in general hearing from the board and lots of head nodding is that yes, this is something that we want to pay some time and attention to. And I assure you, it is not because any of this was forgotten or not thought to be important over the last 5 years, but with the beauty of the shape that we're in now, both financially and with some of the deeper learning work and how well that's moving along, is that it does free us up to be working on that next layer of the student experience that we want to be sure our kids are having. And so we have time and space a little bit more to work on a few of these things than we would have had the capacity to do a few years ago, and perhaps have some more of the availability of financial resources to tie to some of that bigger picture of what we wanted to do. So what I'm hearing is that we want to continue this conversation. And so that was our goal tonight, was to get some direction on, yes, this is a priority for us as a board and therefore as a school system and as a school district. And then we'll go back and formulate some committees and some other things. That's again, a job Steve's going to help us with a bit. So I'm thankful he's here tonight, so that we can come back to the board again with, here's kind of what we're thinking is the strategic direction of these programs and how do we expand access and do all of those pieces that goes, sports being a big part of that, but also the other co-curriculars, because we had done a beautiful job at growing our music program and maintaining that and holding that true in our hearts. Even when we were really struggling financially, that's always something we've maintained, but we've lost a lot of participation this last year just with the circumstances the way they were. So it's time for us to maybe be looking at clubs and sports and activities, and how do we really align them as part of that learning experience we want every single person to have in our school district and in our system.
Great.
Yeah, I'll jump in. Deidre, really nice job, kind of exactly where I was going. Yeah, the sense of kind of getting some direction from this conversation, but I just really appreciate the conversation. And I agree, we're in a space right now where we can start to, I think, focus on some of the things that really add value to the experiences we provide for kids. I don't know if any board members have ever heard me do it. I've given a speech a couple times since I've in the last 5 years, and it's titled "All Kids Deserve What the Band Kids Get." And in the speech, I talk about you can substitute band with football team or the basketball or the track team or POMs or what, any kind of organized group that kind of kids join as part of the school experience. And I talk about what kids get in those experiences. And my point in the speech is really to help teachers understand what kids are really looking for in the experience. And how do we figure out how to put that in the experience in classrooms, right? So I've been kind of working the opposite end of this thing, saying, pay attention to what happens in athletics and extracurriculars or co-curriculars, and build those experiences into what we do academically. So I just really appreciate kind of how this all kind of starts to weave together, that it actually supports what we're trying to do in improving kind of, life outcomes for kids. And that's really kind of pulling on the strands of equity and our kind of college and career readiness pieces all together. I told, since, there's been a bunch of stories tonight, so I told Deidre this one of my high school experience. And it'll be 40 years this spring since I graduated, but it goes to, the little story goes to some of the language, Bill, you used, and Bill, you did a great job presenting, even though you never know that it's not something you normally do. So nice job. But some of the language you use that we use that struck me tonight is we encourage students to participate. Well, where I went to high school, if you were not in an organized sport, if you tried out and didn't make a team, or you didn't try out, you had to play in an intramural sport. And if you're not an athlete, you played intramurals 3 seasons. So in the fall, I played flag football every year, and I loved it. I still don't really understand football, but the point of intramural football was not to get good at football, it was to play, right? And so I just loved playing. And so this idea of encourage, maybe the team that organizes needs to shift language to this idea of the philosophy, right? To expect or even require. And if it's a requirement, we're going to figure out how to build the resources around it to make it happen, right? So I think there's a real opportunity in this that we have yet to tap, and I'm glad we're going to. So this is pretty cool.
And if I could just add one thing to that, I know there's a couple of hands up as well, but something that along those same lines that Gary just said that sort of struck me as something that we say all the time is our kids are more than a test score, right? And so our kids are also more than a trophy or a medal or all those things. It's about the process and the feeling and the intent and that sense of belonging that also comes out of participating in all of these things. And that's the exact same idea. Now, the end result, like Bill was talking about, we have our highest ACT scores in 5 years. And that came from investing in our kids wanting to work hard and wanting to be a part of something. So the natural outcome of philosophically aligning this work and really getting the intent of that sense of belonging and being part of our community will result in more achievement and more medals and all of those things. But that sort of struck me as Gary was talking is this is the deeper learning work. And this is the work that we're trying to do, are those pathways to equity through deeper learning. This embodies a lot of that kind of what we're talking about as our philosophical approach to this work as well.
You're muted, hon.
Forgot to unmute myself. This question is kind of directed at Matt, Justin, and Greg, but I'm not expecting an answer tonight. I don't mean to put you guys on the spot, but I'm hoping by leaders in your building, athletic and administrative leader, that by listening to these conversations tonight, maybe that stimulated some thought in your head from some ideas or maybe things that were done in past places you were at that you can add to the next time that we have this conversation as a group.
Noah?
Dr. Lexman touched on something that I was going to bring up, but decided against it. But since he brought it up, I'm going to echo it. To encourage people to participate, you can require people to participate in some way, shape, or form. And much like when you go to college, there's certain things that they just make you take because they think that that's going to make you a better, well-rounded student and in person in society. I think that requiring people to participate in XYZ amount of co-curriculars over the course of time in our high schools may not be a terrible thing to consider as part of our graduation requirements. So I know there's a lot of work that goes into that and blah, 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 but I definitely think that as we're the starting point, I would be a proponent of something like that to help encourage that, because that, as you say, if you require something to happen, then you have to put supports in place so that all students are able to fulfill that requirement. And that then becomes a mandated funding thing that we have to figure out and do. So I think that that would be something that we should consider.
No, I agree with you with that too. And also going back to some of our other conversations about staff retention and growth potential for our staff, right? Start to offer different types of co-curricular activities, opportunities for staff members to join in and to participate in as well. That's another reason why a staff member might want to stay and might want to recruit a friend to come work here and might want to spread positivity amongst their circle as well. I think that there's a lot of benefit across multiple layers by having some kind of enhanced co-curricular program requirement, funding, expectation that I think our whole community can benefit from. Just the right balance and how to do it. And this sounds like a really great starting point.
Yeah, and we continue to work on our profile of a graduate, which I realize we talk about a lot and yet still has not come forward to our board. That is, we have progressed. What we would have come forward with 3 years ago, we already would have outgrown. And so it's been a harder moving target for us than we anticipated originally, because some of the work has moved at such a beautiful pace for some of our learners so quickly. It's evolved faster than we can capture some of it at the present moment. But as we think about these experiences, that is where it also gets embedded as part of that learner profile when someone graduates from our system, that well-rounded approach to who we want them, what we want them to do to be ready to live life on their own terms when they leave us. And it comes from lots of different angles. So I assure you that is work we are still actively working on, and that will at some point come forward to the board as part of that bigger discussion, especially once we get through this challenging year. We had a lot of work going into it last spring, and then we are where we are. So we've put a bit of a pin in that one, but that one will come back as well. And this work can all be incorporated into that.
Great. Matt, you wanted to comment?
Yeah, since Jeff put me on the spot. No, I'm kidding. I'm totally teasing. No, really, I'm energized by the discussion, and Mr. Ustruck, thanks for bringing it to the forefront. You know, I mean, it's good discussion and a good thing to visit here. You know, access and opportunity are big things. You know, how do you get that balance at all the different levels? And like I heard you start to talk about, you know, kids' family structures and how to give them opportunities and get them home and get them to practice, you know, all those different things. But it's energizing seeing that this is a part of the discussion, because it truly is important. Anybody that knows me, I mean, it's not all about athletics and activities, but I think it's extremely important. I'm at most events, and it's definitely a key thing, a key component to the whole high school experience, and completely supportive of the discussion here, and excited about moving forward and putting people together and looking at that. But yeah, that whole piece that Bill talked about regarding just all the competencies, they're hand in hand. You know, the academic, those 6 competencies are hand in hand, what you get out of being on a team or a club or organization, and all those come to fruition in a different aspect. And like you're talking about too, how do you kind of move in the direction of, you know, beyond like urging kids to be involved. You know, how do you get them involved? How do we make that part of the system and the process? So all good discussion, excited about it. And we have, you know, a couple athletic directors that are really into this whole process as well, very supportive of kids and programs. And obviously they're in the business to get as many kids involved as possible. And I know we were talking about even about band. I mean, because that resonates too, because we don't necessarily have a competitive band, but we do have marching band at Hale for sure. And it's like often coming back at, I mean, just all those processes about how do you get field time? And, you know, it's nice having Christy Wachowski has a significant other that is a band director at the collegiate level and really knows about formations. And it's like a whole nother animal when you start getting into all those things. And it's like, how do you get field time and how do you get kids back? You know, and we've tried to work out getting kids back at like after practice, like it's 6 o'clock. Well, that's a whole nother thing too, you know? So when you only get half the people back and you're missing every other kid in a formation, it's kind of tough to move around on a field and make a W when you're missing, you know, every third person, you know, to get a feeling of what that looks. So it's just kind of, how do we make that all happen and bring that together to give the kids the experiences and that equity, access, opportunity, all those pieces. So, but I'm done talking, but yeah, great to hear the conversation and excited about the whole concept of athletics and co-curriculars and moving forward.
And Matt, you just volunteered to be on the committee. So that is amazing. Thank you.
Why wouldn't I be on it?
For taking up that opportunity.
No doubt. I'm there.
Real quick, you want to have a really awesome band, you have an awesome football team, or you have an awesome basketball team. Because that band, when that band's popping on Friday night and the kids are jamming, there's not many better places to be. So band and sports and that stuff, it goes hand in hand.
Okay.
Did you have something else to say?
Yeah, just one last thing. So not only did I want to thank Bill because he has put obviously a ton of time and effort, but also to thank Gary as the chair of the Recreation Committee. There's been a lot of conversation, but most of it, it's kind of landed at conversation. So it's helpful for us to have some kind of direction to move forward as well. And another big work project for us to dive into, which is great. And I wanted to thank Missy for the tutorial on the Google Slides and for being Vanna White, Missy, because that was excellent teaching. For those of you who don't know, Missy teaches for us as well. And she's definitely demonstrated those teacher competencies tonight at the workshop by helping Bill kind of get all of these thoughts he had out onto those slides. So I concur with what Marty said. You did an amazing job. So thank you for that.
I just want to say one other thing about like back to what Bill, the junior programs, we've talked about that for you. It's key is building from the bottom up and getting kids excited. Like Jeff was talking about being part of a team and coming and having fun and moving through the system and keeping those numbers up and so they don't dwindle over time. And then you just have what you have then in the end, you know, so you want to keep as many kids involved and as many levels and yeah, it really starts at that junior level. So that's exciting to hear as well.
It does. We're definitely starting to see the benefits of some of that over the last year or two, which is great from some of the decisions that were made a few years back. So that's great. Well, thank you to everybody for the feedback on all of that. Obviously still lots to do, great conversation and moving everything forward. Definitely overdue for the conversation, but like you said, Deidre, we're at the right place and the right time right now to really put some serious muscle and heart and energy behind all of this. So very much looking forward to what comes next. If I can be a committee member at any point after my board tenure, I'd be happy to help as a parent. So that I'd be happy to do that too. But we do have a little bit more meeting yet tonight. So at this point, we would look for a motion to adjourn into recess and then into our closed session. So we'd look for a motion and a second to adjourn the special meeting tonight and then go into closed.
Move to adjourn.
Second.
All those in favor, say aye.
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 Opposed? All right, we will take a quick 5-minute break and head back into closed session.